So writing proposals is one of the most important things that we do as scientists because it gives us the money either to support ourselves or our research. And I'm going to go over the more general points of writing a proposal, and we're starting right now. In this video, I'm going to cover the background and preliminary data sections of the proposal and also the work package design. I'm not going to talk so much about the other parts of a proposal because I may do it in a separate video, but they're also going to be more specific to your particular area of science. So first, I'm going to talk about the background and preliminary data section. So first, about the background section of your proposal. The background section of the proposal serves basically two purposes. On the one hand, it shows that you have command of the literature that's pertinent for your field of your proposal, and you demonstrate that by citing the right papers. And the second purpose is that using the literature and arranging it in a logically sound way, you basically can describe what the gap is in the current knowledge that your proposed work is supposed to fill. So in that background section, it's just as important to describe very carefully what's known and how it's known, but then also to state very clearly what is not known or in which ways it is not known. For example, this is known from lab experiments, but it's not known in the field. And here are some tips for writing the background section. And actually, when you think about it, the background section has a lot in common with writing the introduction section for a research paper. So the first point is, just like for an introduction section to a research paper, start broad. Not ridiculously broad, but suitably broad to your target audience. And so that's important because in the beginning you want to capture the interest of people that are going to read your proposal. They're going to be reviewers, but they're also going to be panelists of your funding agency. And the panelists are not necessarily, or in some cases rarely, experts in what you do and what your proposed research is on. So you want to also attract these people, right? You want to make it relevant to them, and you want to make it interesting to these people to continue reading. So start therefore with a statement of why this is an important thing to be doing and how it helps society, it helps a general understanding of the world around us or whatever your research is on. Just like you would start a first sentence of an introduction section for a research paper. And that also makes a difference for which journal you write it, right? So you would for a general ecological journal, for example, you would have to start broader than if you're writing it to a specialist journal where you can already assume that the readers of this journal basically will have already, for example, know about soil if it's to a soils journal. You don't need to emphasize that point. So basically, whatever is the call, if it's in response to a call or if it's a free proposal, basically not in response to any particular call, make sure you start with a general broad statement that attracts your readers to this particular proposed work. And just like in the introduction section, where basically of a paper where you step by step in this triangle format sort of lead the reader to the point of your particular paper, here you want to lead the reader of your proposal to your question. Make sure you have very good logical flow in your different sections of the background section. You start very broad and then you bit by bit narrow down the field, explain what's been done and what's not being done, and then it culminates in the statement of, therefore here in this proposal we will examine such and such. So I think it's very important to have this logical flow very well established so that you don't lose people that read your background section. Again, like in an introduction section to a research paper, it's very important that you pay a lot of attention to citing the pertinent literature and you don't miss any important papers, because otherwise it will send the message that your view of the world is biased and therefore it can derail your entire proposal right then and there. I mean, if you're not citing the relevant papers in this field, it looks like either you don't know them or you want to basically suppress that information. And that's bad news. So you got to spend a lot of effort making sure that you cite the pertinent literature in your background section. If applicable, in your background section, use your own work to demonstrate how you have already contributed to that field, unless you're, of course, a very early career researcher. That's important to emphasize in your proposal. Again, don't overdo it. Don't cite your own work over that of another author who would actually have more pertinent information for the sentence you're seeking support for. So just like good citation practices for a paper. But if you do have this contribution already to mention in your proposal, in most cases you will have at least some, make sure you cite that in your background section along with other papers. And of course, explain at every point why this is important, why this is needed, and how it brings science forward. Don't let your readers guess at that, right? So make it easy for them, explain why this is important to the readers of your proposal. And also use, I definitely, this may be more a matter of personal style, but I also use bolds to highlight certain things that I find very important and I therefore want to sort of visually, jump into your eyes as you're reading this particular text. So make sure that I sort of insert some bold statements every once in a while when things are really important and I don't want the reader to miss these points. But that's a matter of sort of personal preference. Yeah, so you can see there's just a lot in common with the introduction section of a paper. You have a logical flow, you're starting broad, you're leading the reader by the hand, you're getting them to the particular question that is to be addressed in this particular proposal. Well, and the next section is preliminary data or preliminary work for the proposal. Now, this is separate from the background section and usually is also given a different section or is being asked to present it in a different section because it's different. It's work that you specifically did in support of that project. That is, in many cases, not published yet. If it's published, of course, you need to cite that and you need to follow very carefully the instructions of your funding agency with that because this can be a very tricky business. But basically, preliminary data is the specific work that you have done already in support of your particular project. And so why is that important? Basically, it means you have anticipated some of the problems that may encounter during this proposed work, or some of the problems that a reviewer may actually uncover as they read your text. They're like, well, can they really do that? Will that experimental setup work? Will that inoculation with this certain microorganism in the soil, whatever, will that work? And so basically you anticipate what the reviewer might perceive as particularly critical points from, mostly it's about methods, right? Or maybe it's also direction of results. And then you do a little pilot study basically that tests this point. And that is very, very important to the reviewers because it shows to them, well, first of all, that this can work in principle, but even more importantly, that it worked for you. In your hands, with your facilities, at your institution, in your lab, with your means, basically, that you have. And so it makes the whole proposal sort of less likely to fail, right? And nobody wants to fund a possible failure. So this is extremely important because you're basically reassuring the reviewers and the panelists that, well, I have thought of this being a critical point and I have addressed it with a small targeted experiment and see, this is the result we got, and therefore this will likely work. Now, these are preliminary results, but that doesn't mean you can be sloppy, right? You still need to properly describe what you did very concisely. You need to analyze it statistically. You need to have a quality graph. Maybe you want to have a picture of your setup if it's an experimental study. So make sure this is all very professional in appearance and don't be fooled by the description preliminary data, which means like, well, I didn't really try. So this is not what this means. It means like this is really, you've anticipated problems and you've acted on it and you are getting basically supporting data. So maybe a better word would be supporting data for your proposal. This is the way you should think about it. And make no mistake, people will judge the quality of the preliminary data if it was done reasonably, it was presented in a professional way. So this is another thing that your reviewers and your panelists will judge your proposal on. So make sure you give it a proper effort and don't do like a slapdash job at throwing some data together. Now, also make sure that it really matches the critical points in your proposal and is not just something that looks like haphazard or it didn't have anything, so you threw this in because there wasn't anything better available. That will not reflect well, right? I mean, make sure that you have really done a small targeted experiment that is not necessarily a lot of effort, but it just shows that you can do this and you have thought about this critical point. Don't use just some unrelated data set and basically sell it under preliminary data. Now remember, the goal of this section is to minimize risk from the perspective of the funding agency. So of course it becomes even more important if you're trying to do something very new or something that is at least new for you, like you haven't done, let's say, molecular ecology work or something like this. And well, here you have done some, and you can do it, and you can use the pipelines and the statistical tools, and you have the setup to do it. So I think it becomes more important if it's something very new or if it's something new to you. What's also nice is if you have these nice preliminary data, it's very good to refer back to them in the other parts of the proposal, like when you describe the work packages and have the methods for the work packages, then you can say, well, we are going to do the inoculation like such and such because our preliminary data showed that this and this way worked very well. So I think it's good to refer back to your preliminary data in various other parts of the proposal. I mean, don't overdo it, obviously, but whenever there's critical points, make sure that you remind the reviewer you have thought of this and look back at the preliminary data. We could do it this and this way, and this is why we're doing it this way in the proposal, because we've already tried it out. And again, make sure that you understand the rules of your funding agencies very carefully in the preliminary data. You, for example, are not allowed to sell as preliminary data in your proposal something that's already, say, like published or is in a preprint. You must then cite it. So be very careful about how you present things in your preliminary data section, because otherwise it could be qualified as academic misconduct, and you definitely don't want to do that. Well, the next part is then how you design your work packages. And that takes a lot of time and is very, very difficult. I gotta be completely honest, every time this is the most important, but also most difficult thing about writing a proposal. This is also typically where most things go wrong, and also where most inexperienced people writing proposals get derailed. So here is what I suggest you do. Make a list of all the things that you would like to do and questions that you would like to ask. And this is sort of the raw material for your proposal. And then from that list, you basically draw items that then become the work packages. So I think it's very useful to think of the various things that you're going to do in your proposal as work packages, if you call them that or not. They are like the subsections of your proposed work, experimental work, observational work, or whatever you're doing, but let's call them work packages. And now the way I do it, and it may work differently for you, but the way I design every proposal is I try to draw it. So I have like my little pool of questions or things that I would like to do, and then I try to arrange them in a conceptual figure. And a conceptual figure should make clear what the relationship of the various work packages or questions is to each other, and it should very clearly demonstrate why each of these components is necessary. I think one of the most common mistakes people make is like everything they are finding interesting goes into the proposal, but this is not how a proposal works. A proposal needs to be a coherent package. Every part, every work package needs to contribute a certain function to your proposal, and it must appear as a necessary function for the success of this proposal. And together, they must be more than just the sum of the individual work package parts. And so this is why it's so difficult to define these proposals, because you have always more questions that you would like to answer. And when it's curiosity-driven research or whatever, but you cannot put them all in at equal rank in your proposal, because it will have way too many questions. So you need to have few questions, and you need to define work packages that have very clearly defined purposes in your proposal that then contribute to the whole. And so everybody works differently in this respect. I like to just have like a box and arrow diagram or whatever that just explains to me what is the logical flow between the work packages? Do they depend on each other? Is there an input from one work package to another work package, for example? How do they overall contribute to the question? Are they all really necessary, or can I do away with some and then get rid of them? This is the most painful part, but just ditch these things that are looking just ancillary and that will derail the reviewers. Because for the reviewer, of course, you've thought about this for hours, days, and months, but a reviewer needs to get what you are trying to do very, very quickly, maybe on the train ride to the panel meeting or whatever, or they all have no time, of course. So I think you need to make it easy for them to grasp what it is that you want to do. And so that logical structure is, I would say, almost 80–90% of the success of the proposal. If that somehow is not coming across why you are doing the things that you are doing, you have failed. So I think this is why this takes so much time. This is why this is so difficult. Once you have the work package structure, you can just fill it with the methods and the task and whatever. I'm not saying this is never necessarily always that easy either, but I think then you have the logical structure and you can fill it with the content that is like specific to your proposal and therefore more difficult to talk about in general terms, right? But that work package structure, that's hard and requires a lot of thinking. And it may require multiple iterations to figure out which one is the most convincing to you, right? If you're really honest about it. And maybe your pet question is then no longer in there. That makes it super annoying. But you know, in the end, you want this thing to be funded. And if it's better when your particular one of your pet questions is not in there, if it's logically more coherent, then by all means take it out. I mean, because you want this to be funded, because otherwise this is all wasted time. Right, so I think this takes a lot of time. You need to ask all these questions that I have just mentioned of your work package logical structure, and only when you're satisfied does it really make sense to go on. And then you just describe the different work packages. But make sure in every work package you still reiterate why this work package is necessary, what its contribution is to the overall success of the proposal, and what information it delivers to other work packages. So make sure you repeat this information and make sure that you also refer to that figure. And by all means, put in this figure. I think this is super important, that you have some visual support for what the logical flow of your entire proposal is. So if you have, I mean, if you're this kind of person that likes to draw things out like I am, then of course this is much closer already. You just need to make that prettier, and then this is your central overview figure. And really put effort into that figure. I mean, you're asking for a lot of money in these proposals, so I think it's the expectation to have quality figure has also gone up in proposals, not just research papers. And so, you know, give it this extra effort to make it a really nice, convincing, conceptual figure. And I guarantee you it will help. And then, you know, work on the different work packages, have a logical structure within each work package. The methods you can maybe have in a different section, or you can put them into the work packages. This depends on what you're actually doing. If it's always the same kind of methods, then put it in a method section that's separate. If the methods are very, very different from work package to work package, might be making more sense to put them within the work packages. And also your funding agency may have rules for that. But what will always be in common is that logical structure needs to be right. Now, something that most people forget is, like, in the end, you need to also analyze these data, right? So you need to say what the statistics that you're going to be using, and you needs to make sure that you have thought about what kind of data are you getting and what kind of statistics are you actually going to be using to analyze these data, or are you creating data that you can analyze? So you want to make sure that you have thought of that next step, right? How you analyze the data, and also in a way that then supports and addresses the hypothesis and goals that you have put forth in your proposal. That's very important. So then when you have, let's say, we get this result from this work package, this experiment within this work package, what does that actually mean for our hypothesis and goal? So it might mean, like, if the interaction term is significant, then it might mean that this depends on that. And this was our major goal hypothesis or whatever. So I think go that extra step. Don't let the reviewers or panelists guess about what does, now you have some result, right? But then what does it mean for the hypothesis or the goal that you're addressing? Most, I mean, many, I'm not saying most, but many proposals that I've read, they didn't go that additional step to explain it. You know, here's the statistics that I'm going to be using. I've carefully thought them through. These are the packages in R that I will be needing, maybe even. And this is the kind of statistics I need in order to get that thing out from this experiment that I wanted, right? And then when I get this result, this is what it means. So go that extra step and really tie it all together in the end, like what the outcome from this experiment within the work package actually means and contributes to the overall project goal. So I hope you found this helpful. As I said, writing proposals is a lot of work, and it's a lot of mental effort also that goes into these. And I hope your next one is a success. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.